the craziest sentences are given to criminals with the most horrific crimes. In this video, we cover mass murderers, serial killers, and child predators. While many seem to know they may never see the light of day again, their sentences are often too insane to ignore. And wait until you hear about Craig Ross Jr. His twisted case shocked everyone when the verdict was handed down.
It's 12 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, and then those life sentences are also consecutive to 3,318 years in the Department of Corrections.
The story of James Holmes proves that having a happy home and a good education does not always mean being capable of good things. James Holmes is an American mass murderer, responsible for the 2012 Aurora Theater shooting. James killed 12 people and injured 70 others at a Century 16 movie theater on July 20th, 2012. James's childhood was a comfortable one. His father is a mathematician and scientist, while his mother is a registered nurse. Holmes grew up fairly comfortably and lived a fairly affluent life in San Diego. However, as he grew older, Holmes began to develop mental health issues. He attempted suicide at 11 because he was scared of what he called nail ghosts, which would hammer on his walls at night. After a while, Holmes began to display even more disturbing habits, like obsessing over killing for a long time. Despite these issues, Holmes graduated in the top 1% of his class at the University of Illinois. He was a member of several honor societies and eventually received a grant to study neuroscience as a PhD student at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus in Aurora. It was during this period that Holmes began to exhibit more signs of schizotypal personality disorder strongly. He also made constant jokes about killing people and how he wanted to kill as many as possible. Holmes was also obsessed with movies and theaters. He would employ this to carry out one of the most horrific mass murders in America. On July 19th, Holmes went to the movie theater, paid for a ticket, and went inside. After a while, he snuck out of an exit door and returned with weapons, gas, and smoke canisters. He set off the canisters before closing the door and opening fire on the theater audience. He had planned to kill the audience past midnight because he didn't want to kill children and knew that they wouldn't be in the cinema at that time. He killed 12 people and wounded 70 people before going to stand next to his car, waiting for the police to arrest him.
Targets, random. Method, bombs with the word X'd out, and in parentheses, too regulated and suspicious.
Holmes was arrested and charged with 24 counts of first-degree murder, 116 counts of attempted murder, possession of explosive devices, and inciting violence. Investigation revealed that Holmes had planned the killing for weeks and even sent his notebook detailing his plan to his psychiatrist on the day of the mass murder.
It's 12 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, and then those life sentences are also consecutive to 3,318 years in the Department of Corrections.
Holmes was found guilty of all charges on July 16, 2014. Because of the circumstances, Holmes's lawyers begged the jurors to consider mental illness in his sentencing, even though his insanity plea was rejected. Ultimately, instead of being sentenced to death, James Holmes was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences and 3,318 years without the possibility of parole. As Holmes was led away from the courtroom, the families of the victims cheered. Where James Holmes was a mass murderer who committed this violent crime in a day, Gary Ridgway methodically plastered his name in history as one of the worst men to ever exist.
Mr. Ridgway, how do you plead to the charge of aggravated murder in the first degree as charged in count 1 for the death of Wendy Lee Caulfield?
Guilty.
Gary Ridgway is considered the second most prolific killer in United States history. Also known as the Green River Killer, Ridgway murdered somewhere between 71 and 99 adult workers between 1982 and 1998. He seemed to have an undisclosed hatred for adult workers and prostitutes, as these were all of his victims. Gary Ridgway's childhood was anything but ordinary. His father complained about the presence of adult workers often. His mother was described as a domineering woman, and relatives said that Ridgway may have witnessed more than one violent argument between his parents.
He talked about having some sexual feelings towards her. He described in some detail watching her when she was in a bathing suit and looking at her and thinking that she dressed pretty provocatively.
Ridgway had a bedwetting problem until he was 13 years old. After every episode, his mother used to forcefully wash his private parts. This was what probably introduced Ridgway into a love-hate relationship with sexual intimacy. He told psychologists later on that he had conflicted feelings of anger and attraction toward his mother, and would consider killing her, fantasizing about it. When Ridgway was 16, he stabbed a 6-year-old boy through his ribs into his liver. The boy survived the attack and Ridgway didn't face severe consequences. He was married 3 times to 3 different women. Ridgway and his second wife had a son together, but their marriage failed because Ridgway was constantly unfaithful.
So I whipped out my ID, and with my ID would be I'd put my finger over my driver's license to hide my name, but on the opposite side was pictures.
In the 1980s, Ridgway targeted adult workers in Washington and gained their trust by showing them a photo of his son. He would lure them into his car, and when they traveled far enough, Ridgway killed them. He either strangled them with his hands or used garrots. Afterward, he would dump their bodies in wooded areas and often go back to engage in necrophilia before eventually burying his victims. It was later revealed that even though Ridgway claimed to hate adult workers, he would engage in intercourse with his victims before killing them. After 6 women were found this way, a task force was opened to try and find him. Despite this, Ridgway would not be arrested for these serial killings for almost 20 years. Even though he was a suspect as early as 1982, he somehow stayed free. He also passed a polygraph test in 1994, therefore reducing the suspicion towards him. In 2001, because of advances in DNA testing technology, investigators were able to re-examine evidence from the crime scenes and found abundant DNA belonging to Ridgway. On November 30, 2001, Ridgway was arrested as he was leaving his workplace. The investigation lasted a long time because in an earlier interview, he claimed that he had murdered at least 71 people. He didn't cooperate with police as they'd like, and he eventually cut a deal with the police.
Mr. Ridgway, how do you plead to the charge of aggravated murder in the first degree as charged in count 1 for the death of Wendy Lee Caulfield?
Guilty.
Eventually, he took a plea deal in exchange for providing information on where to find the remains of his other victims. Ridgway pled guilty to 48 counts of aggravated first-degree murder. The plea deal also spared him the death penalty in exchange for more information about his victims.
There are people here that hate you. I'm not one of them. You've made it difficult to live up to what I believe, and that is what God says to do, and that's to forgive. You are forgiven.
During his sentencing, Ridgway admitted to killing at least 71 adult workers. Ridgway showed no emotion whatsoever. He pleaded guilty to all 48 counts. During victim impact statements, Ridgway remained mostly emotionless. However, when the father of one of his victims said he forgave him, Ridgway became emotional and cried a bit. Ultimately, he was sentenced to 48 life sentences and 10 years each for tampering with the evidence of those 48 cases he pleaded guilty to. He's serving his sentence in the Washington State Penitentiary. Gary Ridgway became a prolific serial killer for his actions. How does it compare to a man who kidnapped and assaulted a literal child?
If you're going to meet the new population of people you'll be staying with for the next 47 years, keep exercising, build strength, and know every person you will meet in your new living quarters knows exactly what you did.
The worst kind of sexual offenders are pedophiles, and in the case of Craig Ross Jr., his despicable actions altered the lives of a family in Saratoga, Wyoming. In September 2023, a 9-year-old girl went missing while she was riding her bike in Moreau State Park. Her family had been camping at the site before she suddenly disappeared. A search was conducted, and immediately the girl's parents discovered that she was missing. It was soon realized that she was abducted. The breakthrough in the abduction came just after 4 a.m. on October 2nd when someone drove by the girl's family residence and placed a ransom note in the mailbox demanding $50,000. A trooper guarding the residence saw the man drop off the note, but by the time he checked it and realized what had happened, the unidentified man had slipped away in his pickup. After a check was run on the note, the fingerprint identified the man as 46-year-old Craig Ross Jr. 10 hours after this, state police found the girl where she was being held hostage. Ross had stuffed her in a camper on his mother's property in Milton. The 9-year-old was found alive on October 2nd. While they were happy that their daughter had been found, they were horrified to discover that she had been sexually assaulted by Ross. He was ultimately arrested and charged with first-degree kidnapping and predatory sexual assault against a child.
If you're going to meet the new population of people you'll be staying with for the next 47 years, keep exercising, build strength, and know every person you will meet in your new living quarters knows exactly what you did. Good luck, and God will not have mercy on your soul.
In the courtroom, Ross decided to avoid trial and pleaded guilty to all the charges against him. Notwithstanding, if he had gone to trial, he would have been found guilty anyway. However, it was considered a good thing because the young girl was spared the horrors of having to recount what she suffered. At sentencing, the victim's uncle delivered a powerful impact statement telling Ross how excited he was for him to meet the new population of people he'd be living with in prison.
I used to be the prey and you were the predator. Now I'm the predator and you're the prey. I hope you know I hate your guts.
In the clip you just watched, Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Buckley read the statement from the victim that would make you righteously furious. She drew parallels between what Ross did to her and his punishment. According to Ross's claims, he had just been fired from his job when he saw the 9-year-old and decided to abduct her so he could make some money from getting ransom. The claim implied that the crime he committed was impulsive and that he did not plan what he did. Ross didn't say anything to the family of the victim or even an apology. Ultimately, Craig Ross Jr. was sentenced to 47 years to life in prison for kidnapping and sexual assault. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Craig Ross permanently altered the lives of a family, but how does it compare to a mass murderer who changed the story of an entire country?
You being responsible for killing those people.
It's sad, isn't it? It's horrendous.
Martin Bryant is an Australian mass murderer who shot and killed 35 people and injured 23 people on the 28th and 29th of April 1996. Bryant was born in Hobart, Tasmania in May 1967, and from a young age, he was described as a disturbed child. According to his mother, she would find his toys broken, and she described him as an annoying and infuriating child. A psychiatrist who examined Bryant told his family that he would not be able to hold down a job because he would make people provoked and so angry to the extent that he would always be in trouble. Bryant was fascinated with fire, guns, and violence in general. Things would take a turn for the worse when Martin became a teenager. He began to torture animals and bully younger children. At some point, Bryant had pulled the snorkel from a child's nose while diving. He also cut down trees on a neighbor's property because it looked fun. This disturbing behavior continued until he was an adult. After another psychiatric examination, Bryant was found to be borderline mentally disabled with an IQ of 66, which was equivalent of that of an 11-year-old. Because of this, Bryant remained under the supervision of his parents until his father mysteriously passed away in 1993. After this, Bryant started living alone and became extremely lonely. He grew tired of this and allegedly told a next-door neighbor that he would do something to make everyone remember him. On April 28, 1996, Martin Bryant carried out one of the deadliest mass murders in history at the Port Arthur Historic Site in Tasmania. Before he went to Port Arthur, Bryant killed a couple that his father had told him about a long time ago. According to him, David and Nolene Martin had bought a bed and breakfast that would have greatly helped his family.
Take the shotgun.
Stay inside. I'm pretty sure somebody's got a gun.
There's somebody going crazy shooting people here.
After that, he went to Port Arthur and entered a cafe on the site. After he was done eating, he went to the back room, set up a video camera, brought out a Colt AR-15 SP1 rifle, and started shooting. In under 15 seconds, Bryant killed 12 people and wounded 10. He went to the other side of the shop and fired more shots, killing 8 more people and wounding 2. Bryant left the cafe and continued to shoot more people. He killed 10 more before leaving Port Arthur. After hours of hiding in the bed and breakfast that belonged to the Martins, Bryant was eventually apprehended. By that time, 35 people had been killed and 23 others were injured. Despite the initial diagnosis that Bryant was mentally disabled, he was deemed fit to stand trial. Initially, Bryant pleaded not guilty. However, he was persuaded by his attorney to plead guilty. 2 weeks later, Bryant was sentenced to 35 life sentences plus 1,652 years in prison without the possibility of parole. He will live the rest of his natural life in prison. Martin Bryant's rampage shocked the world with its senseless brutality. But our next case brings us face to face with a chillingly different kind of killer.
It's cold-blooded murder. Cold-blooded murder, young man.
It's not uncommon to see a teenager commit a robbery, but 17-year-old Michael Swanson would take it too far when he not only robbed 2 convenience stores, but ended up gruesomely murdering the attendants. His reaction to being sentenced for these crimes sent shockwaves down the spine of everyone in court. On Monday, the 15th of November, 2010, at the age of 17, Michael Swanson allegedly stole his mother's car and his grandfather's .40 caliber handgun and drove to northern Iowa in search of a thrill. Just after 9 p.m. that day, a young man wearing a ski mask walked into a Crossroads gas station in Algona, Iowa, where he demanded cash and cigarettes from the clerk, 47-year-old Vicki Bowman Hall. Despite complying with his request, the young man chose to shoot her anyway, leaving her for dead as he fled the scene in a Jeep Grand Cherokee. About an hour later, the same young man appeared at a come-and-go convenience store in Humboldt, about 30 miles south of Algona, where he once again demanded cash from the clerk, this time 61-year-old Sheila Myers. Despite Myers handing him the cash he'd asked for, he had already made up his mind just like the prior incident and shot her anyway, in the face, from only 2 feet away. She died instantly and he quickly fled the scene once again. That young man turned out to be 17-year-old Michael Swanson. Before committing those murders, Swanson had driven from St. Louis Park to northern Minnesota to Iowa in a car he had stolen from his mother, Kathleen, along with her debit cards earlier that morning. This wasn't the first time he had stolen his mother's car, his mother, Kathleen, testifying that he'd had violent and sometimes criminal tendencies since he was a toddler. When he was only 11, she was told by a psychiatrist that he was a lost cause when she reported to them that he was a threat to their family members. Swanson had been clinically diagnosed with a host of mental disorders, including ADHD and bipolar disorder, amongst others. One time in 2006 for assembling and storing dangerous weapons, which his aunt discovered in a car trunk after she demanded the money he had stolen from her nonprofit organization where he was doing community service. These dangerous behaviors were a well-known ticking time bomb that would eventually lead Swanson to his downfall. During the second murder, police had received reports of the first from witnesses and began tracing the trail to Swanson. Swanson had managed to get to a McDonald's in Webster City, about 60 miles from Algona, before he was caught and arrested. The police officers also recovered the stolen money and cigarettes, as well as the handgun he used in perpetrating the murders. When interrogated over the murders, Swanson told the police that he shot them so they wouldn't be able to call police or identify him. During his prosecution, Swanson showed no remorse over his actions, as he confessed there was a deliberate attempt to murder Myers. Swanson was eventually charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of robbery. At his first hearing over the murder of Myers in June 2011, the jury reached a quick verdict and Swanson was found guilty of both charges, after which he flipped off the TV cameras. At his second trial that July, he was also found guilty of the robbery and murder of Bowman Hall. For his role in the murders of Myers and Bowman Hall, a then 18-year-old Swanson was handed 2 life sentences without the eligibility of parole. During his sentencing, Swanson could be seen smiling and laughing as his verdict was read.
Blooded murder, young man. And your counsel wants us to believe that you lack the capacity, that you were insane.
Jillian, the daughter of Bowman Hall, confronted Swanson in an emotional statement, calling him a weak coward.
My mom was not only completely 100% innocent, but she was also a defenseless woman when you came in with that gun.
Johnson reportedly told a psychiatrist that he had been fascinated by murder and committing acts of violence since he was 13, and intended to wait until he was 18 so he could kill his parents, who he had planned to be his first victims. In 2013, Swanson's sentence was revised to 60 years before parole eligibility by the governor of Iowa, Terry Branstad, who decided to commute the life sentences of 38 Iowa inmates who had been convicted as juveniles. In November 2014, Swanson was charged with attempted murder while in prison for attacking a fellow inmate with a knife. He was convicted of this charge in 2015 and sentenced to an additional 25 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2089 at the age of 96. Michael Swanson's cold-blooded actions were horrifying, but the next case is just as tragic. Meet Dylan Schumaker, a teenager whose outburst of anger led to an unimaginable crime.
Austin Smith was killed last week, just days shy of his 2nd birthday.
10-year-old Dylan Schumaker is accused of murdering Smith, who would have turned 2.
In March 2013, Dylan Schumaker, a 16-year-old, was babysitting his girlfriend's son, Austin Smith, who was nearly 2 years old. Austin's birthday was just 4 days away, but unfortunately, he would never celebrate his 3rd birthday. According to Austin, he lost his cool with the toddler, leading to a horrific chain of events.
Tonight, we get our first look at the 16-year-old who's accused of killing a little boy in Springville.
At his trial, Dylan claimed that he became frustrated with Austin and resorted to slapping him, spanking him, and ultimately slamming the boy into the floor. As if that weren't enough, Dylan proceeded to punch the toddler in the head several times, all in an attempt to get the child to stop crying. The injuries sustained by Austin proved to be fatal, with his cause of death being ruled as blunt force trauma.
Deputies upon arrival immediately noted the bruising about the face and head of the child.
Dylan Schumaker was arrested and faced charges of 2nd-degree murder and 1st-degree assault. He entered a not guilty plea. In December 2013, Dylan faced trial for the murder of Austin Smith. The tragic incident had left everyone in shock and disbelief.
I didn't mean to kill Austin. Ashley, I really didn't think I did this. I didn't mean to hurt him.
As the trial began, Dylan's defense attorney made a plea to the jury to find Dylan guilty on a lesser charge, which would have given Dylan freedom someday. Yet, despite the defense's best efforts, the jury returned a verdict of second-degree murder. At the sentencing hearing, Dillon was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison.
Dillon Schumaker walked into a state Supreme courtroom pleading his case, telling his victim's mother and the court he's remorseful for what he did.
When the verdict was read, relatives of baby Austin cried from the gallery. Austin Smith's grandmother even expressed sympathy for Dillon, saying he was only 16 and his life was now over before it even started.
Schumaker and his defense attorney fought for the minimum sentence, 15 years to life.
I can't take back what was done. I wish I could. I would give my life for Austin.
According to Dillon's attorney, Dillon was subdued after hearing that he had been found guilty of second-degree murder. However, a news report from Buffalo News paints an entirely different picture of this young murderer. The state Supreme Court justice who sentenced Dillon admitted that he had 13 letters written by witnesses and relatives who called Dillon a manipulator and deceiver. These letters revealed him to be a cunning and manipulative young man, completely different from what was presented during the trial. Further, in a viral video, Dillon claimed because he was a blonde, all he needed to do was cry for a lenient sentence. Dillon Schumaker's impulsive act of violence ended in tragedy, but the next case reveals a far more calculated crime.
Guilty of the crime of conspiracy to commit murder.
Diana Lovejoy, a fitness instructor and YouTuber, was in a strained relationship with her ex-husband, Gregg Mulvihill. As the pair battled over details concerning their contentious divorce, including the custody of their young son. Lovejoy, born on the 26th of October 1972, had dated Mulvihill for a year before the couple got married in 2007. However, the marriage faced problems right from the start, as Lovejoy suffered numerous miscarriages before she finally had a son. And within 7 years of their marriage, Lovejoy had filed for divorce. The long court case following the divorce filing only strained the relationship between the couple further, as the initial full custody and child support benefits granted to Lovejoy for their then 3-year-old son was changed for the couple to share instead. Lovejoy was also required to pay Mulvihill $120,000 as she kept their family house in Carlsbad, California. Lovejoy did pay Mulvihill the required sum, but she never wanted to share custody of her only child, so, in a surprising twist, she hatched a sinister plan to execute her ex-husband. On the 4th of September 2016, Mulvihill received a call from someone pretending to be a private investigator who threatened him with alleged evidence of his mistreatment towards his wife, which could be used against him in court. The caller was able to convince Mulvihill to go to a remote location near Rancho Santa Fe to collect the evidence. And on reaching there with his friend Jason around 11 p.m., Mulvihill was shot in his side after spotting someone in the bushes. However, the bullet missed his heart and he was able to survive the shooting. Investigations into the attempted murder were conducted, and it was quickly concluded from the evidence found, such as cell tower data, that Lovejoy had been involved in the attempted murder. The man behind the gun was also discovered to be former Marine, as well as Lovejoy's gun instructor and lover, Weldon McDavid, who had made a run for it after his failed attempt. The AR-15 rifle he used was later found in his garage. After the pair were arrested a week later, it was revealed that Lovejoy had paid McDavid $2,000 to assassinate her ex-husband to get him out of the picture with concerns over their son. During a court hearing, Lovejoy alleged that Mulvihill had mistreated her and her young son. However, both Mulvihill and the prosecutors disapproved of the claims. Investigators discovered surveillance footage of Lovejoy from less than a month before the attempted murder, where she purchased the burner phone which McDavid had used to call Mulvihill on that fateful night. And on the 13th of November 2016, a jury found Lovejoy and McDavid guilty of attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Video footage captured from the courtroom showed Lovejoy's unexpected reaction when the verdict on her charges was pronounced. Immediately, the guilty verdict was read. Lovejoy, who had been staring blankly ahead while sitting beside her attorney, suddenly slumped as her head hit the desk. There were murmurs of both shock and concern around the courtroom, as it had appeared that Lovejoy had gone unconscious. Court officers had to rush to lay her on the floor before she was eventually rushed to the hospital, where it was confirmed that she had fainted. Lovejoy was eventually sentenced in December to 26 years in prison, while McDavid received a 50-year sentence for being the one who pulled the trigger on Lovejoy's husband. Diana Lovejoy's calculated plot to eliminate her husband was chilling, but the next case takes a wild turn. Ricky Hand, a man who, after being sentenced, pulled off an outrageous stunt in the courtroom that left everyone stunned.
You just gave me 40 years. Well, guess what? Sir, don't say this again.
Showing up to receive sentencing for a previous crime should have been all that Ricky Hand got in the courtroom the day of his sentencing, not adding more years to them. In Springfield, Ohio, 46-year-old Ricky Hand was being sentenced for multiple robberies committed over a significant period of time. He had robbed multiple convenience stores at night where he made away with money and other things. Ricky had committed up to 30 robberies and had been arrested for some of them. He was out on parole when he committed the one that put him back in the courtroom. He had attempted to rob John's drive-thru one night. The store owner was closing for the night, oblivious to the fact that an armed Ricky Hand was lurking around the building, waiting for his opportunity to strike. However, as Ricky made his way to the door, the store owner was waiting for him, armed as well, and began to fire at Ricky to scare him off.
This is John's drive-thru, West Main Street. A guy just tried to rob me and I shot him. He ran out the back door. Okay, is he injured? I think I hit him.
It didn't take long before Ricky had to get the bullet wound treated, so he went to a hospital. It was at this hospital that Ricky was arrested for attempting to rob the shop. He admitted to robbing the store, and the case was taken to the courtroom. Ricky was sentenced to 40 years in prison, and the reason he was given such a lengthy sentence was because he had pleaded guilty to 7 robberies earlier in 2016.
Did you just give me 40 years, sir? Listen, you just gave me 40 years. Well, guess what? Sir, don't say this again.
In retaliation, Ricky pulled out bottles that contained his feces and urine, which he flung at his attorney and the officers around. He was quickly tackled and subdued by the deputies present. As a result of this action, Ricky Hand was charged with an additional 5 counts of harassment with bodily substance. He had attacked his attorney and 4 deputies with his waist. He was also charged with obstructing official business and retaliation. The fact that he had stored these bottles in his arm sling caused the judge to ask that the law enforcement agents intensify their searches before letting anyone into the courtroom next time. Ricky Hand's outrageous courtroom antics were shocking, but the next case is even more disturbing. Eric Smith, a young boy whose brutal and senseless crime left an entire community in disbelief.
Bright red hair and freckles made him a target at school for years, and as a teenager he was seen peddling around town for hours on end alone.
On August 2, 1993, in upstate New York, 13-year-old Eric Smith made a tragic choice that would change his life forever. While riding his bike to camp, he encountered a 4-year-old boy named Derek Roby, who was also going to the same camp. Without hesitation, Eric lured Derek into an isolated wooded area. Once secluded from prying eyes, Eric proceeded to strangle Derek, drop a large rock on his head, and sodomize him with a stick. The brutality of this act was unimaginable, even for the most hardened criminals. To add insult to injury, Eric reached into Derek's lunchbox, pulled out a Kool-Aid packet, and poured it into Derek's wounds. At 11 a.m., Derek's mother arrived at the camp to pick up her son, only to find him missing. Panic set in as she realized that her son never made it there. A full-scale search was launched, with authorities desperately seeking clues and any information about Derek's whereabouts. 4 hours later, the search party stumbled upon a horrific sight: Derek's lifeless body. Derek's cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma and asphyxia. The entire community was engulfed in grief and outrage. About 1 week later, Eric Smith broke the silence and confessed to his mother that he had committed the heinous crime. Eric's mother, horrified by her son's actions, immediately informed the police. Given the ages of both Eric and Derek, the murder became a headline-grabbing story, captivating the attention of the nation. As the media coverage intensified, Eric's face became synonymous with pure evil. Despite barely being a teenager, Eric was charged as an adult for his heinous crime. The prosecution and defense conducted extensive medical tests on Eric, hoping to find any indicators that might shed light on his alleged violent tendencies. However, despite the thorough examinations, the results showed nothing unusual. It perplexed the prosecution and defense teams, leaving more questions than answers. During Eric's trial in 1994, the defense psychiatrist presented alarming evidence that they claimed to have diagnosed Eric with intermittent explosive disorder. This condition is characterized by sudden, uncontrollable outbursts of rage, often resulting in violent behavior. However, the prosecution called an expert who testified that this disorder is rarely seen in children Eric's age. The conflicting testimony further fueled speculation about Eric's mental state and whether he was truly capable of such heinous acts. After weeks of intense deliberation, the jury finally reached a verdict on August 16, 1994. Eric was found guilty of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 9 years to life in prison, the maximum sentence allowed for juvenile offenders at that time. In a letter addressed to Derek's parents, Eric expressed deep remorse for his actions. He wrote if he could go back in time, he would switch places with Derek and endure all the pain he had caused.
It was directed at all the other guys who used to pick on me. And when I was torturing and killing Derek, that was what I saw in my head.
For the next 27 years, Eric was denied parole multiple times. In October 2021, Eric's luck began to change. He was granted parole, sparking widespread outrage and disbelief among the citizens of the small upstate New York town where Derek was murdered. During the parole hearing, Eric shocked everyone by revealing that he had been engaged to an attorney since 2019. In February 2022, Eric Smith's release became official. After serving 27 years in prison, he was finally set free. However, the news of his impending release was met with resistance by the small-town citizens. Determined to make their voices heard, they held peaceful protests to let Eric know they did not want to see him back in their community. The outrage and concern were palpable as residents expressed their fears and unease about the impending release of someone who had committed such heinous crimes. Doreen Roby, Derek's mother, faced the harsh reality of her son's killer being set free. Despite her pain, Doreen vowed to shield herself from further torment. She explained that she doesn't allow Eric Smith to take up space in her head, as she doesn't care where he is or what he's doing as long as he remains distant from her friends and family. Today, Eric Smith is a free man living in New York City's Queens neighborhood. Despite his controversial release, he has avoided the spotlight and maintained a low profile. However, the scars left by his actions remain etched in the hearts of the victims and their families. Eric Smith's horrifying crime shocked everyone, but the next case is one of the most tragic and chilling of all.
You got tired of them bickering and said, just do it. Is that true? I'm sorry?
Yes.
16-year-old Erin Caffey did the unthinkable because of love. Caffey was working as a part-time waitress when she met 18-year-old Charlie Wilkinson. Things became serious between them, and Charlie gave Caffey a promise ring. Erin's parents didn't like the relationship because they felt that something about Wilkinson was off. Because of their suspicions, they went online to see what they could find about Wilkinson. They found out that his page was littered with sexual references and talks about drinking alcohol. Because of this, Erin became scared that her parents would stop her from seeing Wilkinson, so she started talking about killing her family. On March 1, 2008, Erin carried her evil plan out with the help of Wilkinson and his friend, Charles Wade. Wilkinson claimed that even though he suggested that they should run away, Caffey said they should kill her parents instead. So on that day, Wilkinson and Wade entered Caffey's house while they were sleeping and shot her parents multiple times. When Caffey's mother didn't die immediately, Wade used a samurai-style sword and almost decapitated her. This killed her immediately.
He was to get revenge because we made him break up with our daughter. I heard my son Matthew cry out. He said, Charlie, why are you doing this? No, Charlie, no, please, why are you doing this?
Wilkinson and Wade shot Tyler, Erin's younger brother, and took turns slicing Erin's other brother, Matthew, till he died. Wilkinson and Wade then set fire to the house before leaving with Erin and Wade's girlfriend. Terry Caffey, Erin's father, survived the attack and told the officers that Charlie Wilkinson had attacked them. Charlie Wilkinson was found in his trailer and he was arrested. Erin was in the trailer as well, but she claimed that she had been kidnapped. Charles Wade and his girlfriend were arrested as well. However, the horrific revelation came after the police interrogated the four of them. Erin's story quickly fell apart because Wilkinson and Wade told the same story. Erin had orchestrated the murders. Caffey insisted that she had nothing to do with the murders.
I honestly believe that she was not the mastermind, and I'm not saying that out of denial because it's my daughter, but I don't believe my daughter's evil.
In the end, Wilkinson and Wade were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Caffey, on the other hand, was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. Her father, who survived the attack, forgave her, saying that she was manipulated by Wilkinson. Now we turn to Carly Madison's case, where family bonds shattered in an act of violence driven by motives as chilling as they are disturbing.
She was having a mental health crisis.
She doesn't know what was going on at that time. We're asking you to find her not guilty by reason of insanity.
Prosecutors say she shot her mother, Ashley Smiley, a 40-year-old high school math teacher, in the face.
On March 19, 2024, a friend of 14-year-old Carly Gregg reached out to Ashley Smiley, Carly's mother, expressing concerns about her daughter's excessive use of marijuana. The friend revealed that Carly had been indulging in the drug and using burner cell phones, raising alarms about their well-being. Determined to act, Ashley decided to confront her daughter about the rumors. After speaking to Carly's friend, Ashley made her way to Carly's bedroom. What she discovered there shocked her. Several vape pens lay scattered across the bedroom. Alarmed, Ashley quickly wanted answers.
The jury seeing 5 days of disturbing evidence, including this surveillance video. First, you see Gregg with a gun behind her back, pacing around the home.
That afternoon, security camera footage from inside the home captured a chilling scene. Carly, dressed in a Nirvana t-shirt, moved around the house, seemingly hiding something behind her back. It turned out to be a .357 Magnum handgun. As Carly walked out of view from the camera, the sound of 3 gunshots shattered the silence. The footage then showed Carly rushing back to the kitchen, where she sat calmly on the stool at the counter. She took out her phone and texted a friend, asking them to come over because there was an emergency. When Carly's friends arrived at the house, Carly asked them if they had ever seen a dead body. Without further explanation, Carly took them into her mother's bedroom, where Ashley lay lifeless, her face soaked in blood. According to this friend, Carly confessed that her stepfather, Heath Smiley, was next on her list. Using her dead mother's phone, Carly, pretending to be her mother, sent a message to Heath. The message read, "When will you be home, honey?" Little did Heath know that this message was a carefully crafted trap.
Her stepfather, Heath Smiley, coming home moments later, Gregg also shooting him.
When Heath arrived at the front door, Carly ambushed him, shooting her stepfather in the shoulder. Despite the injury, Heath managed to take control of the situation. He overpowered Carly and took the gun away from her, ultimately saving his own life. In a panic, Heath called for help. Police officers arrived swiftly, along with paramedics. Carly was arrested on the spot. As investigators delved into Carly's background, they discovered a diary that shed light on her darkest thoughts. The journal revealed a list of beliefs that painted a chilling picture of Carly's twisted mind. Among these beliefs were statements such as, "There is no God," "It's okay to be evil," and "There is no need for family." The prosecution offered Carly a 40-year plea deal before her trial. However, she declined the offer. Carly's case quickly gained media attention, and the trial commenced 6 months later, in September 2024.
Tonight, a Mississippi teen sentenced to life in prison without parole for murdering her mother and attempting to kill her stepfather.
During the trial, the prosecution presented a compelling argument, painting Carly Gregg as a calculating and cold-hearted killer. They alleged that Carly intentionally shot and killed her mother, Ashley, after Ashley discovered her secret marijuana use. The prosecution described Carly as a dangerous young lady who showed no remorse for her actions and planned the attack on her stepfather.
We, the jury, sentenced the defendant Carly Mass and Gregg to life imprisonment.
The defense, on the other hand, presented a different narrative to the court. They claimed that Carly was in the midst of mental health struggles at the time of the crimes. A psychiatrist testified that Carly's mood swings were exacerbated by the medication she was taking. This psychiatrist argued that Carly's actions were not premeditated, but were driven by her unstable mental state. According to the psychiatrist, Carly's mental health struggles played a significant role in her violent actions. To support this claim, the defense presented Carly's journals as evidence, which revealed a young woman in mental turmoil.
I need to get some information from you. What is her name again?
Carly, C-A-R-L-Y.
C-A-R-L-Y?
Carly Madison.
During the trial, the prosecution presented the body cam footage captured by the police officers at the scene. The video depicted the chaotic aftermath of the murders. As officers arrived at the scene and conducted their investigation, Carly sat at the defense table. She stared intently, her eyes fixed on the screen. As Carly watched the footage, tears welled up in her eyes. The once composed and confident teenager was overcome with emotion. One of the key witnesses in Carly's trial was her stepfather, Heath.
Went off in my face before the door was, 3 or 4 inches wide open.
Heath testified about the tragic events that led to his wife's murder. He stated that despite Carly's actions, he still had a good relationship with her. This statement shocked the public, as it seemed incomprehensible that he could maintain a bond with someone who had shot him and taken the life of his wife. In their closing argument, the prosecution reminded the jury that Carly knew the difference between right and wrong when she committed the murder. After careful consideration, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before delivering their verdict. They returned a guilty verdict, finding Carly guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Carly, who was only 15 years old, was found guilty of first-degree murder. Speaking to WLBT in an exclusive interview, Kevin Gregg, Carly's biological father, said he was embarrassed, angry, upset, and very sad about his daughter's actions. Currently, Carly is being held in the Youthful Offender Unit at the Central Mississippi Correctional Facility. The defense attorneys have indicated that they plan to appeal Carly's conviction. However, given the severity of her crime and the public outcry, it seems unlikely that the appeal will successfully overturn the verdict. Next, we uncover the chilling case of two individuals who inexplicably took the lives of their own grandparents.
All right, Ms. Bjorge, you are charged with 2 felony warrants for murder, 2 felony warrants for aggravated assault.
On April 8, 2017, Gwinnett County, Georgia experienced the shocking and brutal double murders of 63-year-old Randall and Wendy Bjorge. The two were grandparents to 17-year-old Cassandra Bjorge. They had gotten legal custody because she had issues with her parents. Despite the grandparents' best efforts to give Cassandra a good life, she became more troubled and would run away from home from time to time. She also brought home drugs and assaulted her grandmother on multiple occasions. She also had a boyfriend, 19-year-old Johnny Ryder, who she ran away with many times. The couple were described as volatile and toxic. Eventually, they committed worse crimes. On April 8th, the police responded to an assault case in a home in Lawrenceville, and the victims identified the attackers as Johnny Ryder and Cassandra Bjorge. The two of them had attacked Johnny's sister and her boyfriend with a baseball bat and pepper spray before escaping. The car they used to escape belonged to Wendy and Randall, and this led the police to force their way into the home, as they expected the worst. To their horror, they found the bodies of Wendy and Randall. The two of them had been stabbed multiple times. Their autopsies showed that they had suffered blunt force to the head and various cuts around their throats. Everyone was horrified that something like that had happened in their community. Cassie and Johnny became the main suspects in the case, and a day after the Bjorges were found, their granddaughter and her boyfriend were found after they barricaded themselves inside an apartment. They refused to come out, and by the time the SWAT team was able to get a visual, they found out that the teens were injured in the bathroom as they had tried to commit suicide. They failed at this attempt and were taken to the hospital. The two of them were charged with the murders of Cassie's grandparents. The interrogation revealed some shocking details that showed that the murder had been premeditated.
It seems that you're sorry you got caught, that you had people over after. You don't seem to be sorry that you killed your grandparents.
Cassie told the police that they had planned to murder her grandparents and keep their bodies from being discovered. According to Cassandra, she and Johnny waited until her grandparents were asleep before entering their bedroom, duct taping and attacking them. The murder weapons included a tire iron, a baseball bat, a hammer, and butcher knives. The two of them beat and stabbed the Bjorges to death. What's even more horrific is that after the murders, Cassandra sealed the windows and doors with caulk to keep the smell of the decomposing bodies from coming out.
And then we came back to the house.
When you guys left, where'd you guys go to?
We went over to like Kroger or Publix to go get something to eat, and then we went back to the house and we just kind of like chilled there.
Which one?
It was like on Old Peachtree.
Johnny and Cassie then ordered takeout and invited their friends to the house for a party. She also said that they smoked a lot of weed to mask the smell of the bodies as they were in the house for more than a week.
Things like just seemed different. They didn't look at me the same anymore. Like they didn't, I don't know, it was like the vibe that they have was like they didn't really know what to do. They didn't really know like how to be around me, I guess. They didn't really know how to talk to me.
The motive for the murder was shocking. Cassie said she killed her grandparents because they were too strict. She also said that her grandparents weren't the only intended victims. According to her, she and Johnny had planned to kill Johnny's family and Cassandra's mother. They both took a plea deal and didn't go to trial. Both of them were sentenced to 2 life sentences, each with the possibility of parole after 60 years. When the two heard their sentences, their reactions were different from each other. While Johnny apologized for what he did, Cassie was said to have been crying and refused to say anything even when she was given the chance to speak. The two would be eligible for parole in 2077. Johnny Ryder and Cassandra Bjorge's brutal crime left us in disbelief, but the next case takes us into the mind of someone just as chilling.
I had made the gun go off, not purposely though, but like it went to the back of the room because I was like screaming, just like shaking.
So somehow you pulled the trigger?
Yes.
Okay.
This is Christine Paolilla, and she just confessed to a mass murder that had happened 3 years prior. In this clip, she is a nervous wreck, but is not always so. Christine had done well after years of ridicule and bullying. Paolilla was diagnosed with alopecia in kindergarten, and this caused her to lose her hair, eyebrows, and eyelashes. She had to wear wigs because of hair loss. She also had poor vision and wore thick glasses. All of this contributed to her being bullied by her classmates. Paolilla lost self-confidence, and it was not until 2003 that things began to improve.
Christine came home one day, very happy. She said, "Mom," she said, "I made 2 new friends who are the sweetest girls I've ever met." I said, "Who are they?" She said, "Oh, Rachel and Tiffany."
Christine enrolled at Clear Lake High School in Houston, where she met Rachel Coloradis and Tiffany Rowell. Rachel and Tiffany were the school's popular girls and helped her change her appearance and fit in with the rest of the school. This greatly helped, and Christine became popular among the students. Her friendship with Tiffany and Rachel turned things around so much that she was voted Miss Irresistible by her school's student body. But her good streak wouldn't last long, because it was that year that she started dating 21-year-old Christopher Lee Snyder. Christine was only 17 when this illegal relationship started. Christine's relationship caused her parents concern because Snyder was a drug addict and had a lengthy criminal record. Her parents disapproved because they felt that Paolilla would be influenced. She was. She began to use drugs and develop anger issues. On July 18, 2003, things would take a turn for the worse when Christine and Snyder went drug hunting at Tiffany's home. Tiffany, Rachel, Tiffany's boyfriend Marcus Priscilla, and Marcus's cousin Edelbert Sanchez were at the home before Christine and Snyder arrived. The two of them planned to steal drugs from Tiffany's home that night. However, Snyder got into an argument with Marcus, and this led to the shootings of the 4 teens who had been in the house. They were shot by Snyder and Christine.
The kids themselves, drenched in blood. There's blood spatter that's on the walls. There's bullet holes from rounds that have gone into the victims and outside of them.
Rachel attempted to call 911 but was hit in the head by Paolilla with the butt of a gun that was used to shoot her. The rest died almost immediately before fleeing. As for the teens, they were considered victims of a drug deal gone wrong. In 2004, Paolilla entered rehab where she met Stanley Rott, a heroin user. Her relationship with Snyder ended when the latter was jailed for stealing a car. She got married to Rott in 2005. Paolilla came into a trust fund of $360,000 that had been left to her by her father. She used part of the money to buy an apartment. It was in this home that Paolilla would discover on the news that the case of her friend's murder was still open. She confessed to Rott and told him what happened. Because of this, they went into hiding. In 2006, Paolilla and her husband were arrested. Paolilla for the murders and her husband for the 70 vials of heroin that were found in their room. Rott told the police that Paolilla had confessed to him. After Paolilla was interrogated, she confessed to killing her friends. However, she said that Snyder had made her do it.
I had made the gun go off, not purposely though, but like it went to the back of the room because I was like screaming, just like shaking.
So somehow you pulled the trigger?
Yes.
Okay.
Snyder himself was never caught. When he was informed that the police had a search warrant out for him, he committed suicide by overdose in 2006. Paolilla was spared the death penalty because she was a minor at the time of the killings. Paolilla was convicted of 4 counts of capital murder on October 13, 2008. On October 14th, she was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 40 years in prison. The sentences in this video left us speechless, but the justice system never fails to surprise. These cases show just how unpredictable and intense the courtroom can get. If you thought this was wild, the next video on screen dives even deeper into the most shocking and unforgettable punishments handed down. Make sure you don't miss it.